And I'd like to introduce the speaker one of the session, Sri Prakash Seshadri. Sri Prakash Seshadri is a founder and partner CEO of Sea Change Consulting. He is an author. He has published several books, more than 10 books, which was published in Tamil, English, and Hindi. And he's a national builder. He writes blogs and he gives management sessions for the entrepreneurs, leaders, CEOs of various large organizations and large enterprises across the country, outside the country. And he's the chief editor of a magazine, eZine, Electronic eZine, which he started way back, over 15 years ago, called Change Gears. Change Gears is it's a weekly eZine, self-development eZine, offered free of cost to the 14,000 subscribers, opt-in subscribers across the world. He writes every week. He spends 8 hours for writing this eZine and delivered to every participant, every subscribers. And Mr. Prakash has another face. He's a national builder in many forms. There are only two things which I want to share due to paucity of time. One is he's been closely exploring various approaches to support Government of India, for which he has conceived two themes. One is called Glorious India. But there was a book called India That Was Great. It was written in 40s or something like that. How to bring back that glorious India back again is one of the prime objectives in which he is working and exploring options with the Government of India, including the Prime Minister's office. This document has been presented as a blueprint. The second initiative during COVID-19 scenario in the last 60 days, he has brought out India First initiative. It so happened that the self-reliant and Modi's the current approach of inclusiveness and trying to bring in our own growth within the organization, within the country, which is actually kind of a similar blueprint which Mr. Prakash has conceived 60 days ago, called India First Initiative, where he brings in education. Academia is one of the core values, one of the core approaches. Probably during this presentation, I'll be able to cover in detail. The second important major support which he extends to the society in general across the globe is he's a meditator for about 28 years in the organization called Heartfulness Institute of Sri Ramchandra Mission, where he practices Sahaj Marg, heartfulness meditation, Idaya Niraivu Dhyanam, as we call it in Tamil. He is the secretary of the Global Guide and the president of the organization called Heartfulness Institute. It's an international organization for 75 years now. The Global Guide name is Daji. Otherwise, Daji is a fond name. We call him Kamalesh D. Patel. His name is Sri Kamalesh D. Patel. And Mr. Prakash is the lead volunteer of Chennai Metro Zone for several years now, supporting society in educating people, schools, colleges, communities, organizations, all walks of life, in propagating the message of how to manage your body, mind, and soul. With this brief note, I leave this floor to Mr. Prakash Seshadri. Thank you very much. I welcome Mr. Prakash Seshadri.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks a lot to DRBCC Hindu College for arranging this wonderful event. A hearty thanks to Dr. Rajendra Naidu and also to Dr. Kalvi Karasi and my co-panelists, Dr. Hari, and of course the moderator Sea Change Anand, and hundreds of participants who are joining in from various parts of Chennai and Tamil Nadu for this wonderful initiative that the college has taken. Let me go through this a little bit in depth in terms of, if you look at the topic that I've taken, it's called education in these tough times. Why do we start working when we are looking at education in these tough times? There is an old ancient saying called, man is the only one who's bestowed with the ability, what is known as Viveka. That's what made the famous Naren as the person who was able to apply his Viveka and attain bliss, and hence he came to be known as Vivekananda. Viveka also, of course, a person who is able to sort of, you can say that, discriminate. When we look at discrimination, you can discriminate between bad and good, what is right and wrong, and things like that. But the highest discrimination that a human being can really apply in any situation is to either work on the effect or work on the cause. When you work on the effect, you only change the results. Really speaking, when you're looking at education or any topic for that matter, true Viveka is when you are able to change the cause. If you are not able to change the cause, the effects will repeat. There's a famous saying by Einstein, which goes like this: if you keep doing the same things again and again, you will keep getting the same results again and again, which means you need to do something different. And in a pandemic which has struck the world after almost 100 years after the Spanish flu, which is something that I don't think any of the participants today would have gone through what the world went through 100 years ago. These situations call for extraordinary measures, not just certain knee-jerk reactions or just doing things which will just let you tide over. But this is the time which you have on hand for you to actually reroot the tree and bring it to another place or plant a completely new tree altogether. If you don't work on the cause, you will continue to reap the effect, and there is one more chance that we have actually slipped by. Let's look at the approach that I intend presenting in this 30 to 40 minutes of inputs. There are three things when it comes to anything that we want to work upon or change. The first is to decide on the why. Why are we doing this? If that is not defined, what is likely to happen is that whatever we do will be superficial in nature. It will not be something that will have a lasting change, and we are likely to go around in circles, and most probably the effects that we saw earlier will keep coming back. The new normal would just be a distant dream which we would have lost again. And hence, defining the why is extremely critical for us before we actually jump into the subject a little bit deeper. Once the why is defined very clearly, we look at the what. The what is nothing but the results that you would like to achieve in the short run to mid run to reach the why, which is the long run. Why is more like a vision statement that you want to bring about in say a period of 3 to 5 years time or something like that. And what are the incremental steps that we take over a period of time, short term, mid term, long term, to reach the why. Of course, in this presentation, I do not have the time to deep dive into the how. How can be seen as the plan? If why is the vision, what is the goal? How is the plan? Plan of reaching the what and hence reaching the why. How is something that we can always deliberate in depth later, because this is what we have been talking with many academicians and ministries and a lot of bureaucrats and politicians. So that's a very long drawn out game. Unfortunately, we really look at the world. If you look at many of the webinars we attend, many of the talk shows that you see on TV, people straight away jump into the how. They speak about small steps. They speak about incremental steps. It's like just changing the chairs in a classroom and thinking that you've brought about a big change. All you have done is nothing but rearrange what was already existed to give it a facelift or a window dressing. Nothing really changes, but you just get a fanciful feeling that you've done something wonderful, you pat on the back, and before you realize a few years have gone and then the next pandemic might hit you. Let's look at the why. The why that I have defined, which I have been defining for quite some time in all the major circles that I present such papers. This is something that each and every participant, I want you to think through. All these details, of course, will be available as a video recording later also. The why that I have defined here is very clear. Make world-class Indian citizen by redesigning the education system. Look at the why. This is something which will look like a very, very, very distant dream. As many of you are reading, there will be a lot of question marks flying across your face. There will be a lot of thoughts that will be crossing your mind to think whether this is even possible. To make world-class Indian citizens by redesigning the education system, is it really possible? Or is it something that we are capable of doing out of our own, I would say, like what I'm saying, is it even possible? One of the favorite topics that I speak in B schools and many of the CEOs and leaders that I meet is a concept called as minority leadership. If you look at anything in this world, the biggest of changes that have happened, formation of religions like Christianity or Islam or Buddhism or Jainism, or if you look at the great scientific changes that have happened, if you look at many of the political upheavals that have happened in the last hundreds of years, it all happened. Even if you look at the redefinition of Earth as one of the planets going around the sun, which was made by Galileo, for which he was literally put to death, it all came from someone who had the audacity, who had the guts to think something different. When Gandhiji came to India, he was literally a single person. When you had been made a recipient of the bad effects of the apartheid in South Africa, and he decided to come to India, and then he saw what Indians were going through, which made him to develop the resolve that he has to do something about it and then go deeper. That was what I call as, that is something called as minority leadership. There is a famous saying in English, all it needs for bad to survive is for a few good men to do nothing. Let me repeat it. All that it needs for bad to survive is for a few good men to do nothing. And if you have a great idea, and if you just think because people laugh at you, because people tell you it's not possible, that is exactly when you know for sure that you have a great idea on your hand. And some of the thoughts that I'm going to share with you today, many of them will resonate, and many of you would have secretly also thought that these are the changes that need to come into the education system. Yet you may be wondering, is it something which we are capable of doing? Should we even attempt? Why go through it? Why fight the tide? Just go through the process and at the end of the day, collect your salary, retire, have your pension, go into the graveyard. The hyphen that separates between the date of birth of a year and the date of death of a year must be full of value that we leave behind, a legacy that we leave behind. And this is where thought and heart leadership plays a great part. It all starts with one single person, which is you. And when you start, and when you believe in that larger why, it sort of starts a ripple effect with lots of initial resistance. And then finally, it engulfs the entire human population, where people will start accepting it as the way of life, and that becomes the new normal. A new normal is always to start something which is audacious, which everyone thinks is impossible. Let me give you a scenario. Before I go into the what, let me talk about the role of what is really the role of education. There is this famous definition which has been given by a famous English Nobel laureate who said that the role of literacy is just to make you study. The role of education is to make you a complete human being. Are we in the role of just offering literacy, or are we in the role of actually providing education? Do you remember Lord Macaulay, 200 odd years ago, when he was given a very clear narrative to change the face of India? He had come here with a very clear purpose of finding out what is it which is stopping English to conquer India. And the rest is history. He went around for 5 to 10 years and then came back and then presented a famous paper which very clearly said Indians are very, very strong. They are extremely high on self-esteem. Their confidence levels are high and we have to break it. And how do we break it? He said, bring in a rote educational system, which will compel them to go through a literacy process, which will make them go for a job. And once they go for a job and they become a subordinate to an English boss, the rest is something that we can easily achieve. Once that paper was accepted, it took about 25 to 30 years for them to roll this out. And after that, for almost close to 200 and 250 years, even after the colonialism has left, we are still almost going through the same process. Today, many of the education institutions speak more about the success record in terms of passes, success record in terms of the placements that they have made. How many educational institutions have a vision where they say that we make global citizens, we make world-class citizens, and then we say that in this year, out of 100 people, 7 people were made as global citizens? That would be something which would have given 7 maybe Mahatma Gandhis or 7 Einstein or 7 Abdul Kalams to the world. Instead, what is the current system? I'm not blaming anyone here because we're all part of the system. We grew up in this system. What are the current system actually providing? I'm not against the current system. I'm only looking at what it is actually providing and whether it will take us towards the why that we want us to go towards to. It is actually creating memory machines. When I went through my 10th board exams and plus 2 board exams, all I was told by my teachers to do is take the last 5 to 10 years of question papers, just keep doing them again and again and again, because only from these question papers, the questions will be set up for the next exam. If you're able to memorize the questions and answers for about in each subject for about 150 to 200 questions, in all probability, you'll be able to crack all the answers. Even in school, when I asked my teachers as to why do I have to do it, they all say that if you don't do it, you'll not get a good college seat. And if you don't get a good college seat, you will not get a good job. And if you don't get a good job, you'll not get paid well. And if you don't get paid well, you don't get married. And if you don't get and blah, blah. And you all know how it goes on. Imagine the entire DNA of Indians to a great extent has been programmed with one single obsession that education or the so-called literacy must lead to getting a job and being materially successful. Absolutely no harm with that. Can we parallelly look at redefining some of the areas that we need to do? The biggest new normal challenge that we all have today for us to overcome is our ability to adapt. What is the ability to adapt? One of the famous quotations attributed to the famous anthropologist Darwin, he says that the most successful species is not the toughest, it is the one which is most adaptive to change. Do we have the ability to adapt? Adaptability or adaptability quotient today is one of the most sought after in the employment circle, specifically in the mid to top level leadership. When I interview candidates at mid to top level, when I coach them, when I mentor them, the one thing that I continuously work is in making them adaptable. Adaptable to what? Adaptable to predict the change. Adapt to change whatever they need to change so that they become the change makers, not the people who follow the change. And the time that we are in currently calls for massive changes, not just simple changes. It calls for massive changes. When it comes to massive changes, there are 2 things that we need to look at. If you look at the acronym in the slide, there is something I put as COI versus COC. Something called as COI stands for Circle of Influence. Circle of influence actually means things that we can actually control and change. And the biggest thing that we can control and change is my thinking, my adaptability, my attitude, my behavior, my transformation, my metamorphosis into a global citizen. This is absolutely in my control. And partly I have control, like many of the faculties who are participating in this program. You're all role models. People look up to you. From the time I was in school, I always looked up to teachers to learn what is life. They are the ones who gave me the building blocks in my young days. I still remember the primary school teachers, 1 or 2 of them who played a great part in shaping up what I am today. I still remember them because they gave me the the seeds which allowed me to a great extent think through and become. The same was true in my higher secondary school education as well. There are 1 or 2 teachers who really had a great influence in shaping my thinking and how I looked at life. You have a great ability to influence the students in your classroom. You also have the ability because, in my view, without the right teaching mechanisms in place, the entire society is likely to collapse. Circle of influence is your ability to actually influence things that are around you. The second is circle of concern, things which are happening around me which I cannot change. For example, I don't think you and I can go ahead and stop COVID from spreading. It's a circle of concern. I'm worried about it, but there is nothing that I can really do. Can I change it? No. Can I discuss about it? Maybe yes. But really, is there something that I can contribute? I can contribute by making that minute changes in me, which will make me towards a collective change, which in turn will change the society. Hence, when I'm presenting some of the what here in the next few slides, some of them are circle of influence, which at your level, at the level of the institution, you will be able to modify and change. Some of them are circle of concern as of now. But as you continue to expand your circle of influence, you will come to a situation where you will be able to actually include circle of concern and even make that a circle of influence. What if you're able to meet the Prime Minister in groups? What if you're able to meet all the major lawmakers over a period of next 6 months to 1 year? What if all of you are convinced and start blogging about this? What if all of you start making YouTube videos about these changes that I'm going to speak about? It will create a ripple. In any big pond, the first drop of the stone doesn't make too many ripples. It is the continuous ripples which will unsettle the pond and the churn happens. We need to be at it, and for that we need massive doses of confidence and adapt to the situation that currently needs massive doses of changes. In the entire scenario, if you really look at it, there are about 6 stakeholders who need to be actually influenced. The first is the people, majority of you are watching it today, the teaching fraternity. The second is the students on whom you have a great amount of influence in changing. The third are the educational institutions. At least those who are at the hem of affairs have a say in terms of what they can bring in terms of changes within the educational institution. Parents, to a great extent, through the PTAs that you work, you will be able to bring certain influences on them, and then they may be able to also get influence and then move around going, help you in changing. The society, partly yes, partly no. Government, maybe it's a circle of concern, but we'll still talk about it. And the sixth one, which is an industry institution connect. While it is currently happening, there are a lot of major shifts that can take place positively. These are the 6 buckets. I'm going to share certain quick insights. I'm not going to have detailed slides, but I'll not be going in depth on each of the point. I'll maybe take 1 or 2 points in each of the slides. The rest of the slides, I want you to think over and then mull over what it needs to be done. I mean, one of the biggest secret that I've learned in teaching is not to share the information, but to make the student curious so that they learn on their own. I'm going to make you curious. In each of the slide, I'll just touch maybe 1 or 2 points and leave the rest to you for you to figure out what exactly each of the point is about. And believe me, none of these points are rocket science. All these are very simple, plain English. The moment you dive deep, you will be able to understand what I'm sharing in each and every one of them. Some of the points are very close to you, close to your heart. Some of them, maybe they are a little bit non-technical at a strategic or at a policy level, but you still will understand because you are a recipient in all the 6 boxes that I'm sharing here in terms of the positive or the negative side of it. Let's look at what are the changes that we need to bring in terms of when it comes to handling teachers. This is already happening, fortunately, thanks to COVID. Though I have been speaking about this for quite a few years, thanks to COVID, the biggest shift that has happened is in the ability of the teachers to adapt and adopt the international standards when it comes to at least the technical skills. The teaching skills, yet we are evolving. There are a lot of teaching skills which are still available worldwide, whether you take the Khan Academy or the changes that have happened in Finland, the changes that have happened in Singapore and many of the other developing countries, Israel, for example. I've studied many of these models where there are tremendous amount of teaching skills changes that have happened, which are possible for you to equip yourself with the help of institutions. The second point is today dealing with student is not easy. 20, 30 years back, students, thanks to the lack of exposure of those days, the only exposure we had were newspapers and maybe a little bit of radio, and that's it. Television even came much, much later. But today, the millennials or the next level of students are coming in who are sub 15 category. They all have tremendous amount of access to knowledge, entertainment, and a lot of other stuff which are not really healthy. It puts a tremendous amount of classroom pressure. Today, in many of my interactions with the teachers, one of the things that I keep hearing is that, Prakash, for us to actually teach is not a biggest issue. The challenge is in handling the social, cognitive, and emotional gaps between what we are to what the students are. A lot of inputs that the teachers have to go through in terms of the social skills, in terms of the cognitive skills that they need to upgrade, not in terms of subjective knowledge. I'm talking here in terms of how the millennials think and respond is something. Unless I think how the student is thinking, it will not be possible for me to actually dive deep and share the same subject at his frequency for him to capture it. The next is the emotional skills. Emotional intelligence is one of the most sought after skill in any walk of life. We have to keep our calm. You can meditate, you can do a lot of other steps. We have to maintain the calm and peace in the classroom, in the educational institution. And all this calls for tremendous amount of skill you need to build up those skills. The last point, there are only 3 points I have here, is to make the teachers' earnings on par with each of the major industries. For example, today, as far as I know, the earnings for the teacher is not on par with maybe a scientist, maybe a person who's a great engineer, maybe a person who's a doctor. But if you really look at it, each of these people who made it big in their profession actually made it big because some teacher invested the time in making them grow up. So I am actually on par with the thinking in the market, which is emerging slowly, that the teachers, even to attract the best of the talent today, many of the schools are actually going out of the way to find how to package. It is just not about the pay alone. It is about the rewards. It's about the recognition. It is about the changes that you are able to help bring the teachers bring in their own life. How we are able to make them upscale, how we are able to make them look at life differently. All these changes, when teachers go through, teachers start becoming more and more effective. And what they deliver in classroom becomes really world class, leading to the why that we have been speaking about. Let's move to the next bucket. The students, one of the fundamental building blocks of any change in education system, unless the students in some way buy into this, unless they are convinced that what you are sharing is good, because after all, for close to 4 to 5 generations, each generation is a box of about 25 to 30 years, we all have been thinking differently in terms of education system. Go through the basic educational courses, go through the 10th standard, finish the board exam, go to +2, get some good marks, get a good placement in a college, and then get a job and settle and things like that. I propose a few points which I want you to think, and maybe you can share it with the students as well later. Instead of focusing on a results-driven education, how many of us really have time for us to give time for them to think creatively? Whenever I meet students in many of the I go and address many colleges, schools, in helping them with a lot of skills on the social and emotional side. They all come back with ideas which are really out of the box. I watch many of the videos on YouTube where people post some of the biggest, even the last year you would have seen one of the micro satellites which was sent into the orbit was made by literally a school student or so. The amount of creativity these people have bottled up are not being used because that energy is being just used to memorize stuff and reproduce and get marks. We need to find a way to make the students creative, do whatever is essential. I have a lot of thoughts and ideas. I can share it a little bit later in case we have the time in a different forum. Teach them thinking, living by values and morals. This is one thing I remember when I was in school. We used to have a moral class, 2 classes every week. Many of the stories, the Aesop fables, or many of the Tamil stories, Panchatantra Kadaigal, and all that were shared, left really an indelible mark in terms of my thinking and helped me shape on how to look at life. The respect for yourself, the respect for others, taking care of elders, taking care of the society. These kind of values today, people apparently don't have the time. And by the time they really want to learn, they don't have the time because they're busy chasing something else. UNESCO has apparently coined a word called learning to be as a very famous word. This is something which can help create world-class citizens at an age when they are amenable to change. As they say in Tamil, "Aindil vilayadadu, aindadil vilayadu." Between the age of 5 to 15, there are a lot of courses like shaping up your brain using programs like Brighter Minds, which help you to actually shape your midbrain. These are the ones which allow the students to really unleash their potential. By the time of when they are about 13 to 15, the neurons are well settled where it is difficult to reprogram to a great extent. Like if you are 40 to 50 plus, it's extremely difficult for me to make you to rethink about things differently. But at the age of between 5 and 15, it is still possible for us to do. impart critical life skills from young age. I remember meeting a family about a year ago in one of the educational institutions meet, where the father had passed away and the mother was about 28 or 30. She had two kids and she did not even know what are the login password, what are the financial assets, what are the insurance claim. And the children were sort of 8 and 5. And none of them had any financial literacy at all about what life is. These are the critical knowledge which I have even returned to CBSE and NCRT long ago, asking them to include critical skills from young age, one class a week or something like that, financial knowledge, cultural knowledge, and self-defense, for example, today, which is becoming extremely important, specifically right from the time of Nirbhaya or many of the cases, specifically when the gender violence is getting out of hand. This is something which will come into effect in many of the schools if you catch them really young. These are some of the thoughts. I only made it very small for students. Let's look at educational institutions itself. We need to find moving towards heart-centered approach to teaching and learning. What is a heart-centered approach? Instead of just applying the mind to everything, also learn to apply the heart parallelly. Because anything that we do in life, it is a 50-50 situation. To a great extent, initially the thought is triggered, and then your heart tells you whether something is right or wrong. These are the tools which can be easily imbibed, and it doesn't cost much for the educational institutions. One of the social work that I do, which Mr. Anand shared while he introduced me, is the heartfulness work that we do. We do actually teach heart-centered approach to students and teaching faculty alike. And literally it comes free of cost. And there are many people who do this good cause as well. Education institutions can also find ways of imparting life skills and soft skills from young age. These are skills which are being imparted, but today these are being imparted in some of the colleges from the first year. And in many of the colleges, it's like window dressing in the last year when placement companies rush in. At that point of time, it's more like a bridal makeup. It will wear off once the wedding is over. The true colors will be seen, which is really not ideal. To make fundamental changes, if this is brought part of the curriculum itself, nothing like it. If it is not possible for you to bring it part of the curriculum, look at how we can actually impart it on an ongoing basis, on a weekly or a fortnightly basis. You also need to do things which need to build the self-confidence and self-esteem and also communication skills. These are just not classroom sessions, but to a great extent in terms of how you help build trust and respect in the school between the teaching faculty and the students. How the words that you choose to use, the stories that you share. For example, implementing 21st century styles of learning in classroom includes sharing of learning videos, successful people. People have been brave-hearted. People have done extraordinary things. When these things are shown, I remember when I was in school, every week on a Saturday, there was one parent who was rich enough to have, those days he had a 16 projection camera with him, projection system. He used to come and play 10, 15-minute short videos, right from Wales and right from anything else. Those were the days when it was only black and white. I still remember waiting to see those videos because those videos left a lot of learning, which helped me to understand a lot of stuff in life, including standing up. When you see a Veera Shivaji or a Veerabandi Kattabomman or movies like that, whether what is being portrayed is historically correct or not, at least it gives you a sense of national pride. It gives a sense of standing up. Today, the first thing people do is they don't stand up, they just give in meekly. And that's why you find whether it's a man mammal fight or any other fight, people refuse to take sides because their confidence levels are low, their self esteem is low, and they don't stand up for social causes. And at an institutional level, you can also build online platforms more and more, specifically because right now, at least for the next 1 or 2 months, it's going to be difficult for you to develop face-to-face learning platforms. It is better that you start looking at it. There are already ready-made courses available in Coursera, Udemy, Khan Academy. Some of them are free, some of them are paid. But you can start looking at it because you can integrate and make it a lot of fun. And some of these are certification courses as well. Let's look at parents and society as to what can be done. We all have the parent-teachers meeting frequently, and many of the PTAs normally turn out to be drab affairs because they just read out the marks and it's a one-way street. Very rarely you'll find that parents are even allowed to express them. There are a few schools who are forward-looking schools and colleges, but in colleges, literally PTAs don't exist. I mean, it's next to impossible to even think convening a PTA in a college. But if you're able to convert it into a transparent and open forum for exchange of ideas, you don't need to actually implement all the ideas that you get, but even listening to many of the ideas that come from parents, because many of the parents are successful in their professional and personal lives. Some of them are great businessmen, some of them are people who are in high post in organizations, some of them are social workers in a very big cause. They all will have brilliant ideas that they can do. This can be done even remotely. You don't need to even have a face-to-face. You can have a PTA app developed exclusively for the education institution, where you can have a landing page for ideas, and then you vet the ideas, you get back to them saying what you have done and things like that. And involve parents, specifically when it comes to key decision making of the institutions. Because some of the parents I speak to after many of such sessions that I do in college and schools, they come back and say that there is so much more we can actually contribute. In one of the educational institution I interacted with, they were extremely cooperative in allowing the parents to work. And it was surprisingly found that many of the parents even went out of the way to contribute more than what was expected, both financially, using the power and authority or whatever is essential to get a lot of things done for the school, including certain international exchange programs and things like that. These are things where parents can obviously contribute a lot. One of the building blocks, which is not exactly in our control, but I'll still share. That's why I put the question mark COC or circle of concern. Governments. Governments must, this is something I've shared in many of the public forums, including writing to government on this. Currently, the literacy rate in India is less than 75%. And we need to look at least why I put 4 years, you may wonder, is because that is the tenure of the current government left. They can easily look at converting this into 90%. This is doable if you are able to look at allocating a specific GDP, which I'll come to a little bit later. That is also something which India currently lacks, is we rarely get Nobel Prizes. In the last 100 years, we have hardly 2 or 3 to speak about. And they all have come from the non-science stream. They have not come from the science stream at all. We need to target at least in the next 4 years. It takes about 4 to 5 years of work to work towards getting a Nobel Prize. If you're able to do it at least for 2 Nobel Prizes, some of the Nobel Prizes have been won in the recent years are won by Indians, but they won it from outside of India, which means that we have it in our genes and DNA. It's a question of the government working towards it. Make financial literacy compulsory for all students, right from first standard onwards. Basic literacy, what is finance, what is saving, what is expense, what is income, what is a deposit, how to build an asset, what is a current asset, all these, if they are really taught, at least the students will exactly know where their parents are stacking their money, or are they saving, or are they bankrupt. It also actually, I found in some of the students I've helped to learn this, it has brought down the family expenses a lot, because the parents, when they make their monthly budget with the income they have, they actually bring their children who are the students who have gone through the financial literacy program, and they're able to sit and actually tell them, son or daughter, this is what our situation is. And the boy wants a fancy phone. He says, Papa, I don't need it now. Let's look at it next year. Imagine what happens, because they are now thinking on your behalf. And children are really extremely smart when it comes to such thinking. It may not be possible for us to redo the education system currently. For this, I am looking at proposing an alternate or a parallel stream of value-added educational system, not as a curriculum base, but as a value addition which involves and promotes innovation, creativity, and making people as entrepreneurs. And if when you come to the next point, the HDI or the Human Development Index, which was the core of my presentation in 2014 March to the PMO, one of the 15 points I shared is to make the Human Development Index of India to be 0.8 or more, which is actually on par, which will make us in terms of developed countries. India is way, way below, which actually consists of 3 things: a long and healthy life, life expectancy at birth, which means mortality rate, and an acceptable education index, and a decent standard of living. Today, the BPL size is something we all know. This is a continuation of the slide because there are a lot more points. Internet and broadband penetration, which is currently, it's a good, but it is still not high, to be made as 80% of more. Science and technology budget year on year, which is currently very, very low, less than 1.2%, to be made as 3.5% of the GDP. Because when you implement science and technology budgets, you don't have any other way but to reroute that money to education institutions for them to teach the students who are the primary feeding point for these future scientists and technologists. 25% of the youth to be made ready to work in agricultural sector, which is the backbone of India. 10% of the age group of 18 to 30 to become entrepreneurs. If this is something doable, we already have the framework and the methodology to do this. And this is something which already I heard is in the back burner for quite some time. The government has to take it out and start doing. Redesign the learning environment and syllabus. World over, there are a lot of great institutions who are ready to come and help us with that. Some work is going on, more needs to happen. Establish sports management courses in every institution. This is mainly because a healthy body and a healthy mind is essential for a student to be healthy on all other fronts. And for this, mental mastery and physical mastery is essential. Many of the education institutions are doing a great job in this, but we need to dive a little bit deeper to take it one or few notches more. The CSR ambit for corporates needs to be extended a little bit, where every corporate which is in the CSR bucket has to be made to adopt one school or education institution, preferably in underdeveloped taluks, so that it creates a educational balance. Currently, there's a huge educational imbalance between urban, semi-urban, and rural areas. Enable rural students on pan-India and pan-world educational exchange visits. A couple of other points which I've shared here. Industry Institution Connects, which is one of the last buckets that I wanted to speak about, is industry to sponsor local institutions for taking local talent, specifically in the MSME and SME sector. Industry should look at using their CSR to build local institutions by FDP, faculty development support, career guidance, English skills to students, etc. Today, whether you like it or not, knowledge of English is essential for you to be placed in a good job and even to travel abroad. Industry should also invite local institutions for industry visits and give them a lot of on-the-job work so that students learn even when they are in the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th standard, which some institutions are doing, which I'm aware, at least in Tamil Nadu. There are a few general inputs which I wanted to share here before I move to the closing of my session. I have another 5 minutes left. Our education system to adapt a variable pace of learning. There's a big challenge. We all assume that every student who is looking or sitting in the class is capable of learning at the same speed. What if he has autism? What he has if he has certain disabilities when it comes to learning? We all treat all of them same. First standard means 12 months, you have to finish, go to the second standard, go to the third. It's not necessary. At the end of every year, if you're able to do some kind of psychological and physiological assessment, medical assessment, and decide who will be able to go fast, who will be on fast stream, who will be on slow stream. This is something which is done in very developed countries, yet to be done in India, which needs to be done. Allow education to manifest instead of just textbook learning. We have to look at learning which is real life, not just job-centered and textbook. Education must focus on whole brain development because predominantly currently people are only using the left brain, which is the logical brain, and part of the right brain to memorize from where the learning and language comes in. Rest of the time, the creative side is not used. And having one teacher attached to one student for a period of 5 years. This is something which I'm borrowing from some of the advanced societies because this develops a bonding where the student develops a liking for the teacher and hence he develops a liking for the subject. It doesn't work vice versa. I remember that when I moved from 10th standard to 11th standard, between 7th and 10th standard, I had the same maths teacher who really drilled mathematics in a very beautiful, loving, heart-centered way. When I moved into the 11th, I came across a completely different teacher and I could not connect with the teacher at all. I cannot blame him or I cannot blame myself, but it stopped me from learning and I became a very poor student in math as compared to what my ability was. When you attach the same student to the teacher for a fixed period of time, it has a dramatic effect because emotionally they feel connected, which helps them actually speaking in a cognitive way. And some of the other points that I'm sharing here, which are there on the slide, which you can take it, which I already shared in my preliminary points as well. Overall, what am I looking at? I'm just having another 2 minutes to complete, so I am just going to my last slide. Overall, going back to the why. Redesign the education system to move away from making students just literate to making them educated or as better human beings. In short, calling them or making them world-class citizens. Whatever needs to be done has to be done. This is up to us for us right now to do this. And I hope that people who are watching here will become part of the circle of COI, as they say, influence, and then see if they can take it forward and take it to next level. With this, I complete my current presentation. Back to you, Mr. Anand.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prakash. I know that you maintain time on dot every time. I've been seeing you for the last 20 years. So thank you very, very much, because you have touched several points for the country to look at, not just a few institutions. Government and all the 6 stakeholders which you mentioned in the presentation is mind-blowing, and I received a lot of feedback as the session was progressing in the chat room, that many professors, academicians, and teachers are responding, stating that this is very, very useful for the research work as well. So thank you so much for connecting several dots, which will definitely be of great help to the country to look up. And I'm sure the academicians, teachers, and professors will take this forward in at least to collaborate, all of us, in one single platform. Thanks to COVID and the new normal, today the technology is available at our doorstep. I think we can form a collaborative model through the online tools like WebEx, which we are currently using, and form a kind of deliberations, even with speakers like Mr. Prakash and many other people, eminent people are available across the country.